GM everyone, and welcome in the Alchemy Road to Web3 Week 4. I am Vito, and today I'm gonna walk you through how to create an NFT gallery application that displays NFTs belonging to an address or to a collection. How to do that? Well, before going deeper into the code, let me introduce myself once again. I am Vito, I am a developer advocate at Alchemy, Twitter content creator, and full stack Web3 developer. The question I want to ask you today is only one. What is the biggest struggle for Web3 developers? Well, your first answer might be scammers. And if you don't know why I'm using the CIFO image for scammers, well, you should definitely look into the Wonderland issue and why CIFO was one of the main characters in that issue. Well, it's not scammer in this case. And even if Snoop Dogg is saying another thing, it's not even gas fees. I mean, on Ethereum, gas fees can get really, really high. And we as Web3 developers, our job is to optimize our smart contracts to lower the gas fees as much as possible, or we can use L2 chains, but in this case are not gas fees. Well, and it's not even security. I mean, security is fundamental. And if you're creating your own smart contracts, you have to make sure that are not exploitable but very malicious intended people. Well, in this case, it's not security though. The issue here is querying the blockchain. Why that? Let's say we have Josh, and Josh is asking a very simple question. That is, how many NFTs that this address have owned? Well, the answer though is not that easy to get. Why that? Because first of all, Josh would need to get the data of all the NFTs that are on chain. How to do that? Well, he will need to run this function that is coming from the official Ethereum API, that is ethGetLogs, that allows you to get all the logs from blocks from the blockchain. And for logs, I mean all the events, all the functions that have been fired into a given block. And you can also filter for the events you're interested in. For example, let's say we're interested in the mint function, and we only want to get all the mint functions that run into a given block. Well, to do that, we can pass an argument inside ethGetLogs that is the kkak256, the hash function of the function we want to retrieve. In this case, the mint function that has a to address and a URI. So passing this argument into this function will retrieve all the mint functions that fired into a given block. Now, you can imagine that this is an awful lot of job. Why that? Well, it would need to run ethGetLogs for every niche block into the blockchain, on the blockchain. Block 0, block 1, block 2, 3, 4, 5, until it reaches the end of the blockchain. And just to get all the NFTs that have been minted, not the actual addresses that are owning those. Because after an NFT has been minted, it can also be transferred. So this is, as you can imagine, an humongous amount of data, no matter where you store it. And to be more precise, just to get all the minted NFTs, it would need to run ethGetLogs 147 billion times. Not counting checking all the transactions, because this is an awful lot of work more. Now, again, this is a lot of work, but we have a solution. And the solution is the Alchemy NFT API. What do I mean by that? We actually did the job for you. We queried the blockchain, we got all the information and the data you need, and now you can access all this information via HTTP calls. So RESTful API to get data from the blockchain. What kind of data? Well, you have four main endpoints. The get NFTs endpoint to get all the NFTs owned by a given address, wallet address usually. Get NFTs for collection to get all the NFTs belonging to a given collection. Get owners for token, get the owner or the owners of a given token. And get NFT metadata to get the metadata of a given token ID. Well, before going again into the code, let me show you what we're going to build today. If I go out from our slides and I go to localhost 3000, you can go there. This is on my laptop, so I'm sorry for that, but we're gonna build the same. Or you can clone the repo that is in the description of this video. Just a second, if you're liking this video and if you're enjoying Road to Web3, a completely free educational learning journey to become a Web3 developer, well, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification, and leave a comment to let us know what kind of things, what kind of lessons you would like to see in the future on this channel. Well, back to our demo. Let's say we have a wallet address. So let me go to OpenSea and copy a random wallet address. Go back to our demo application and paste the wallet address here. Click on Fetch NFTs, and these will fetch all the NFTs owned by that address. Now, let's say we only want to see the NFTs owned by that address, but belonging to the other side collection. Well, I can click here, go back, paste the smart contract address of our collection here in the other input, click on fetch NFTs, and now I'm only filtering for the NFTs belonging to the other side collection. What if I want to get all the NFTs inside the other side collection without taking care of the wallet owning them? Well, I can simply delete the wallet address, tick the get collection toggle box, click on fetch NFTs again, and scroll a little, and now as you can see, we have all the NFTs inside the other side lands collection. Amazing, isn't it? Here we have other information, such as the ID of the NFT, the collection smart contract address, and if I click on view on Etherscan, I can also go to the smart contract Etherscan page where I can see all the methods that have been fired, all the transactions, how the total supply, the orders, the transfers, all the information about this collection. Now, back to our slides. What are you going to learn today? You're going to learn how to query the blockchain, how to get data out of the blockchain to answer your questions, how to use the Alchemy NFT API to get your questions faster, to get your answers faster, how to create an NFT gallery. We're going to explore how to create the front end, how to fetch the data, and how to handle this data. And more precisely, we're going to learn how to handle NFTs metadata to show the image, description, ID, smart contract address, and much more on our application, on our NFT gallery. But if you're new to Road to Web3, let me also tell you that each week we're running weekly challenges, weekly lessons that if you complete are going to reward you with an NFT. And also, even more than that, we have a very active community of more than 5,000 developers walking your same learning journey and building together, helping each other. You can join us on Discord and Telegram. The link will be in the description of this video. And as you can see here, this is an NFT. One of the NFTs that our students got rewarded with in the last weeks and the previous weeks completing these challenges. So if you're excited as I am, as Albert is, so if you don't know Albert, definitely look at week 3 video, or Rahat look at week 3 video. Sorry, Albert week 2 video, Rahat week 3 video, then definitely join us. If you want to join us, again, the link is in the description. There is a form, fill it up, and join Road to Web3. Amazing community. Now, that said, let's get into the code and let's build our NFT gallery application. The first thing I want you to do is open up your terminal, navigate to the folder you're keeping your projects, in this case it's tutorial, and spin up a new Next.js application. Now, if you're not familiar with Next.js, Next.js is very similar to React, but gives us other features such as server-side rendering, or the ability to create backends directly inside the same application, or create pages much more easily. To create a Next.js application, the only thing you'll need to do is run npx and then create -next app. But what we want to do is add another library that is Tailwind CSS that will allow us to style our application with ease. To do so, we can just write -e and then with -Tailwind CSS. Press enter, and this will ask us the name of the application, the name of the folder. In this case will be NFT demo RTW2 free, sorry, Road to Web 3, no Road to Web 2. This is so boomer. And press enter again. Wait a couple of seconds, and this will create the files for us. Now that our boilerplates are ready, let's get into it. Let's write code period. I'm sorry. First, navigate. Now that our boilerplates are ready, let's navigate to the folder we just created. So cd NFT demo RTW3 and then code dot. That is the shortcut to open VS Code in the folder we are in. So I'm gonna make it full screen and go ahead. And if you're not familiar with Next.js boilerplates, let me walk you through these very, very fast. So the first thing you'll notice here is the pages folder. In the pages folder, we're going to store all the files representing our pages, such as in this case, we have the index page, and I'm going to show you what's representing in a few seconds. Then we have this other folder that is the API folder. Every file that is contained inside the API folder will be an API endpoint we'll be able to use to retrieve data from our backend. In this case, we won't use it, but for the sake of your knowledge, just keep in mind that you can create APIs by creating new files inside the API folder. Then we have this public folder that contains all the publicly accessible files such as the logo, images, and other files we want our browser to access directly. Then we have the styles folder that contains all the styles of our application. In this case though, we're using Tailwind. So all of our styles will come from Tailwind CSS, and we won't have to write any kind of CSS during this lesson. Then of course we have our git ignore and a bunch of files that are representing our settings, our application settings, such as the next config.js that is telling Next how to build our application, how to verify our files, and so on and so forth. Now that we have a very brief understanding of what's going on in this folder, let's start this application and see what's going on here. So I'm gonna create a new terminal. I'm gonna stop my previous demo application because otherwise it wouldn't work. And then I can write npm run dev. This will take 1 second and give us this HTTP localhost 3001 or 3000, it depends. We can click on it. And as you can see here, this is our index page with welcome to Next.js and another bunch of things here. We don't need it, so we can go back and delete it. So go to the index.tsx page, take everything that is under this div, go back here, go down here, and everything that is before this closing div tag, and delete it. So now, if we go back to our page, nothing is showing. Now let's test everything is working as expected. So I'm gonna create a new h1, so header one, and write hello road to Web3. So going back to our application, we'll show the hello road to Web3 element in the middle of the page. Amazing. Now, what do we need for our NFT gallery application? Well, we need two things. We will need a home page that will have the gallery, and we will need search box, actually 3 things, a home page, a search box, and the component, the NFT card that displays all the information about a given NFT. So let's start from our home page. The first thing I want to do here is create a new div inside our div. So here I'm gonna write div, and it will automatically close the tab. Inside our div, I want to create 3 inputs, 2 text input and 1 toggle box, the one that we saw before with the get NFT collection, get only collection. So what I'm going to do is write -sign input, then close it, and then type will be text. So I'm going to open the quotes and write text inside. Amazing. Now the next input we will need will be the input for the collection address. So I'm going to copy this input, paste it here. Then we're going to need another input that will be a toggle box. So to create the toggle box, I can write label, because we need that get collection paragraph, sentence, close it, and then inside the label, I'm going to create another input. And in this case, instead of text, the type will be checkbox. Checkbox. That's amazing. Let me refresh. So here we have 1 input, here we have another input, and here we have a checkbox. That's great. Now we're missing one more thing for our search box. That is the button. So I can go on a new line, write button here, and this will be our button. So we can see anything because we haven't written any text inside. So we're gonna write, let's go. So now we wait a second, and as you can see here, now we have a button. As easy as that. So we're using this thing called TSX. That is a variation of TS that also allows you to write HTML tags inside. That's a good point though. We don't really want to use TypeScript at the moment. So let's convert back to JavaScript. How do we do that? Very, very simple. We can just rename the files. So go into your folder, rename it with JSX and not TSX. And this will give us an error because we don't need this type anymore. So you can click on import type next page, delete it, and delete also this next page here. And this should work. Now we want to do the same with our underscore app.tsx. And that's it. We can leave the API in TypeScript because we want to use it. So let me remove the app props from our underscore app.jsx, because again, it's the type and we don't need it anymore because we're not using TypeScript. And I can delete this type here and the semicolon, and we're good to go again. Now back to our index.jsx. We have the input, we have another input for our collection address, and we have the input for our checkbox. Now I want to add a bunch of things for the UI. For example, we're not seeing anything at the moment. So what I want to do inside the input, I want to add a new property that is placeholder. As you can see, is auto-completing. And this will give us the possibility to add a placeholder that can be add your wallet address. I can go back to our application, refresh, add your wallet address. And then I want another placeholder for our collection input field. That will be add the collection address. That's amazing. So now we have both of our inputs with something written in it, and so our users will be able to understand what should I write inside of it, right? It's just an input. Should I guess? No. There is a placeholder that is telling you what to add inside, what to write inside. Great. Now we need a bunch of things. First of all, we need a way to store our wallet address variable, and then the collection address variable, and then we will need a function to actually fetch our NFTs, and probably another variable to store if we want to fetch only the collection or the collection owned by an address and filter based on the collection, right? So let's get back to our code. The first thing I want to do here is to create a new variable that will be wallet. So we're going to use a thing in React that is called useState. If you're not familiar with React in general and with React hooks, their documentation is amazing. So you can just write useState, for example, and the first link you'll see is the reactjs.org website, where you can see all the example, all the explanation of how the useState hook, for example, works and how to use it. Well, it's very, very simple though. The only thing you need to do is write const, because we're declaring a constant, and then we're destructuring it. So we're having wallet and set wallet address. And this will populate the first element with our variable value and the second element with a function to set our variable value. You'll understand that in a few seconds. Then equals will be useState. And because our wallet address will be a string, we're just initializing it with a string. Now I can also initialize it with 0x, for example, or other values, but it just doesn't make sense. We only want to specify this is a string. So useState string. Now, what do we want to do? We want this input here to update this variable. And every time we will write something into the add your wallet address input, then we want this variable to update. And of course, this input to reflect the update. So it's more like an interlaced relationship. So how do we do that? First of all, we can use a event handler that is onChange. So I can write onChange, C-H-A-N-G-E, and as you can see, it should autocomplete. It was a bit slow at this time, so I can press enter, and inside onChange, I want to open the parentheses and write E, that is event. So whenever we'll change something on our input, an event will get triggered, and in this event, we will have a bunch of information, such as what is the actual value the input has, right? So what are the letters, what are the words written inside the text input? So I can write E, and then I'm gonna use an arrow function, and inside the arrow function, I'm gonna write set wallet address, and then e.target.value. So what it means is that every time we're gonna change something in our input, this will trigger, and it's gonna save inside the set wallet address the e.target.value, so the value that there is, the things that we're writing inside the input. Now, what we want though is to reflect this in the input itself. So every time we update the wallet value, so this variable value, we want this input to update as well. Actually, it will be like a loop. So whenever we write something into the input, we will save the value inside the wallet variable, and the wallet variable will actually be the value of our input. So how do we do that? We can write value and then equals, open the curly braces, and write wallet inside. So if we go back to our application now, so under localhost 3001, we can write something here. And as you can see, this is updating perfectly. But what's even better is that we can check the state of our hooks. How do we do that? Well, at the moment, I have installed this thing that is called React Components. So you can go on Google and write React Chrome extension, and you can install the same. So it's React Developer Tools. You can install the same, and it will create an extra tab inside your inspect view that will actually tell you like all the components on your page. And for example, this is my own page, and here I have a state that is our wallet state. And if I write something here, as you can see, this state is updating, because every time we write something in our input, the state will update. Now we need to do the same with the collection address. So if we go back to our code here, we can write onChange and then equal e, so open the parentheses, use arrow function, and that set collection address. We haven't yet created this variable, but we're gonna do this in a few seconds. And then again, target.value. And then as the value, we're gonna use the collection. So the same, if I go up here, I can write const and then collection, and then set collection address as we used here, equal use state, and then quotes, because it's gonna be another string, and we want to specify the type, a creation time. And now, if we go back to our application and we go to our home component, we have another state here that is our collection state. So if I write something here, as you can see, this is updating. Amazing. Now, the next step is to create the fetch NFTs function, and then we will need another variable to actually check if we're fetching the collection or if we're fetching the address, the NFTs owned by an address, or the NFTs of a given collection owned by an address. No worries, we're going to do all of these together. So let me go back to the code. So here we have our button. We can actually use also an href tag, so a tag. In this case, I'm going to use the button is actually the same. We're going to style it later on. So here on the button, I can do on click. So this is an event, another event like on change, and it means every time we'll click our button, and then equal. And then again, I'm going to open the curly braces as we did before and go on a new line because we want some more space. And then here, I'm going to open my braces. I'm going to use an arrow function again. Now, why am I using the arrow function? This is super important, because if I don't use the arrow function, what would happen is that, for example, instead of having this arrow function target value, blah, 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 I can delete it. So let me delete all the thing actually. And I can write set wallet address. And then inside I can write target. First of all, we wouldn't have access to the event argument, but second, what will happen is that as soon as the page will render, so as soon as Next.js will render this page, this function will get triggered because it's already a function, right? So we're not waiting to call it, and the only thing we will end up with is a component that doesn't work. So if I go back here to our application, as you can see, too many re-renders, it just doesn't make sense for React to have the function straight into the onChange event handler. So again, we have to go back and have an arrow function inside. And the same will happen for our own click, because what we want to do here is to run fetch NFTs as soon as we'll click our button. So here we go. Now, as you can notice, we haven't yet created our fetch NFTs function, and that's exactly what we're going to do right now. So go on a new line and write const fetch NFTs. This is going to be our fetch NFTs function equal, and then I'm going to use an arrow function here as well. If you're not familiar with the concept of arrow functions, it's nothing different than writing function and fetch NFTs this way, and then opening the braces and the curly braces here. This is exactly the same, but I like the arrow function better because it looks cleaner in my opinion, tidier, and it's a standard I used to use. So just const fetch NFTs arrow function. In this case, actually, it will be an async arrow function. What do I mean by async? If you're not familiar with the async await workflow, you can go on Google and just write async function, actually JavaScript async, and the first result will be from developer.mozilla.org that has this amazing documentation that will walk you through and explain to you how async await and promises work. This is super useful, especially if you're dealing with web technologies or if you're getting data from APIs in general, not just RESTful APIs, because it allows you to create non-blocking functions and handle like async threads and multiple threads, so your application is actually faster, non-blocking, and can deal with data better. But again, look at these docs, learn from it, super useful. Also, there are tons of videos on YouTube, really suggest you to go through them. Now, back to our code, will be an async function. And what we need to do here is first get the NFTs, but also check if we want to look for NFTs owned by an address or filtered by the collection. So get all the NFTs owned by an address, filtered by a collection. How do we do that? First of all, I'm gonna declare a new variable that will be NFTs, that we'll use to store the NFTs we're gonna fetch. And then I'm gonna console log, because of debugging purposes, that we are actually fetching NFTs. So fetching NFTs, and I'm gonna close it here. I'm using the semicolon, even if I'm using JavaScript, just because I feel it makes everything much clearer and organized. It's not mandatory, but I suggest you do the same. And then we want to check, how do we check if we want to check filter actually for the collection? Well, we can check if the collection is there. So if not collection.length, so if the collection doesn't contain any words, any letters, then we know we don't want to filter by collection. Now I'm gonna open the curly braces, and if actually collection is there though, we're gonna filter by collection. Now, inside the if not collection.length, we want to fetch the collection with owner ID. So with the owner address, and not the collection address. How do we do that? Well, we can write we can write NFTs, because we'll save the result in our NFTs variable, and then we're gonna use the fetch function that allows us to fetch information data from other sources, such as in this case a RESTful API. And inside the fetch, we have to write a bunch of parameters. Which parameters? Well, you can go on the Alchemy docs, and under the enhanced APIs, so docs.alchemy.com, under the enhanced APIs category, there is the NFT API category. And inside here, you can see all the endpoints belonging to our NFT APIs, such as get NFTs to get the NFTs owned by an address. And if you scroll a little bit in the page down here, you'll see a bunch of examples, such as how to use the get NFTs endpoint. Now, what we're going to do here, we're going to copy this code, all of this actually, until the fetch, so before the fetch. And we're going to go back to our code, and here I'm gonna paste before the fetch function all of these things we just copied. So what did we just copy? So first of all, we copied the request options, that will tell fetch that our request will be a method get. Then we will have a base URL. This is the base URL that is composed by an API key. In this case, we're using the demo API key. If you don't have an Alchemy account, I'm gonna walk you through how to create one. Actually, how to create a new application in a few seconds, but for the moment, just bear with me. So you will have your API key and your endpoint. So it's gonna be ETH mainnet, because we're using ETH mainnet, and Alchemy API v2 demo. Actually, your API key, and then the endpoint, get NFTs in this case. And then I'm gonna delete the owner address, because we're saving the owner address in the wallet variable, so we don't need to hardcode it. And then the fetch URL will be the base URL, so this base URL here, plus a parameter that will be owner, then in this case will be the wallet. Because what we want here is we want to fetch all the NFTs owned by this wallet. Amazing. Now, what I want to do though here is substitute, not in this case because I don't want to show you my API key, but I want to show you how to substitute this API key, this demo API key, with a known API key, with a private API key. So if you go to alchemy.com here and you log in, you'll see this view. You can create a new hub. So click on this button, give it a name. In this case, I already created mine, but let's say we're gonna create NFT demo RTW32. And it's gonna be on which chain? This is a question you should ask to yourself. So where do you want to fetch the NFTs from? Which chain do you want to use? Do you want to fetch NFTs from Polygon? Do you want to fetch NFTs from Ethereum testnet? Or do you want to fetch NFTs from Ethereum mainnet? Well, in this case, I want to fetch NFTs from Ethereum mainnet. So my application will be on the chain Ethereum and the network mainnet. So I can click on create app and click on my NFT demo RTW32. Click on view keys. This is our dashboard with all the information about our application, compute units, response delay, success percentage, and so on and so forth. I can click on view key, and this is my API key. Don't try to use it. I'm gonna delete the application at the end of this video, but you can simply take this API key here, go back to your code, and substitute this here. If you want to be even more fancier, you can delete it from here, change these quotes to literals. So what do I mean by that? These are the backticks. You can do it with option and I think backslash on the Mac, not sure with Windows. And here you can write $sign and then open two curly braces. Oops, wrong place. After v2. And here we will write API key. So I'm gonna create a new variable that will be const API key equal, and then open the braces and my API key. So what we have here, it will be automatically get the value of this variable and populate substituting the variable with its value, in this case our API key, and then the endpoint. And at the end, we're building the fetch URL, that will be the base URL, so this one, plus the wallet after the owner parameters. Again, you can look at the code in the GitHub repo linked in the description. Now, back to our code, we can write now NFTs like we did before. We already did it actually. And here we want to pass two things. First of all, we want to pass the fetch URL and the request options that we have up here. Then, when this is completed, so when we'll have fetched this, we will also run then, and then it will be data. And then this data will be data.json, because what happens is that we're gonna get a string version of our data, and we want to bring it back to JSON. And to do so, we can use this JSON function that will transform some JSON stringified data into actual JSON. But before doing that, actually want to wait for it, because we want to wait for this fetch function to run and complete its data fetching before continuing with our code, right? So once it has completed, we can go down here after else, and if NFTs is there, so if NFTs, so if we actually have fetch NFTs, we can console log those, so console.log NFTs, and what's even better, we want a function that sets our NFTs, that saves our NFTs into a variable. You might have guessed that already. We're gonna use the same pattern we did before, so using a use state. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna write set NFTs, and then open the braces NFTs. Now, if I move down here, I can write const, and then it will be NFTs, uppercase actually, and then set NFTs equal use state. And in this case though, it won't be a string, because actually our NFTs will be into an array. So it's gonna be initialized as an array. Now, just to make sure everything works, before setting our NFTs, it's good practice to test and see what kind of data is returning from our fetch. So what I'm going to do is, before writing also the logic to filter by collection, I'm gonna test this function out. So how do we do that? Make sure that the button has the onClick method set, so the fetch NFTs, that the onChange is here, the value is here, everything is here, so let's try it out. So go back to your localhost 3001. Actually, go back first to OpenSea to get a wallet address. I'm gonna scroll a little bit, go back to our Bored Ape, Yacht Club, click on the first ape, Balias is the name of this guy, copy his wallet address, go here that in our new application, click on inspect. We want to stay on the console tab because we want to see the value that's been logged. And then I'm gonna click on let's go. So I have copied pasted the wallet address here, click on let's go, fetching NFTs, and now we have a result here. Look at that. Are we seeing that result? Because we're printing the NFTs here. To make sure this is the same string, the same line, I'm gonna write NFTs and then add a comma. So let's go again, fetching NFTs, and these are all the NFTs owned by that address. Super easy. Now let's open this JSON object here. And as you can see, we have a bunch of data we don't really need. I mean, we need it, but not in this case. We have a block hash. So this is the hash of the block, the latest block we're fetching from. And then we have an array with all the NFTs. And I'm gonna take a look at this in a few seconds. And then the total count, so the number of NFTs owned by that address, and the page key. We're gonna use the page key for pagination. This is gonna be part of the challenge actually. Now, going back here, if I open the own NFTs array, I can see there are a bunch of NFTs, and all of these NFTs is carrying with it informations, such as the balance. So how many of these NFTs does this address has? And we're using this, we have the balance because ERC 1155 can have more than one, so it's not unique. Then we have a contract with the contract address of the collection. We have the description with the description of the NFT. We have the ID with the token ID of the NFT. Actually, this is what you're used to see. 13C5, for example. And then we have the media, and inside the media we have two things. It's an array that has a gateway, and as you remember from the first lesson where we created our NFT collection, then we use an IPFS link using Filebase. In this case, it's just the same without using Filebase. It's the common general IPFS link. So what do I mean by that? If I copy this link here and I go to another tab and I copy the link, paste, removing the quotes, and I click on enter, I can see I'll be able to see the image of the NFT. So it's actually storing the media. On the other hand, we have the raw format, that is the IPFS link without the gateway. You won't be able to read it. And then we have some metadata. Inside the metadata, we have the attributes, and we have the description again, and the compiler, so who was the collection deploying the contract, deploying actually this NFT, and the token URI. So what is the token URI associated with that NFT, as we've seen in the first lesson again. So this is the data we want to process. This is the data we want to show in our cards here. So the ID, the name, and the description, if any, and the image, right? Before though, we want to check another thing, and it's the collection part. So now that we are fetching NFTs based on the owner, on the address that is owning them, we also want to fetch only the NFTs that are owned by a given address, but also belonging to a given collection, as we said before. How do we do that? Well, there is just another parameter we'll need to add to our fetch URL. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move all of these, so the API key and the base URL up here, because I don't want to repeat myself many times. And inside here in the else statement, what I'm going to do is console log, first of all, for debugging purposes, fetching NFTs for collection, owned by address. So we know that we're actually fetching NFTs based on the collection that are owned by a given address. And then here, I'm going to write again NFTs as we did before here. And again, oh my God, I'm writing random things, NFTs, and I'm going to copy this. Now, our fetch URL here was base URL and owner. Now we want to add another parameter that will be the contract addresses. So I can copy this fetch URL, go into our else statement, paste it here. It doesn't really matter if there are two cons with the same name, because or we're running this function or we're running this part of the function. We won't ever run both. So it's going to be fetch URL, base URL, question mark, owner equal the wallet. But then we want to an ampersand, so the and symbol, and we're going to write contract addresses. Again, you can read all of these things from our documentation, and then %sign 5b, %sign 5d. That means this parameter will be an array, so we can pass an array of addresses. In this case, we just pass one address, because we don't want to fetch by multiple collections. It's going to be equals, and then we're going to open our $, because this is a literal, backtick, and it's going to be the collection address. This is amazing. So what is going to do is going to fetch all the NFTs owned by this owner with this belonging to this collection address, and all the rest stays the same. How do we test it? We go back to our application, go back to our 3001, and we'll need a collection address. How do we get a collection address? Let me go back to OpenSea. Let me go back to other did for other side. Amazing. Go here, and if you scroll a little bit, you'll see details and the contract address. So click on the link here, and it's going to bring you to Etherscan, and you can copy the contract address from here. So we copied, clicking this little button. We can go back to our application, localhost 3001, paste it here, click, this is not owned by the same address. Actually, this is Hans Peter Mullings, so we also need the address owning that NFT. So I'm going to copy it, go back here, paste it, let's go, and it's going to show us only 3 NFTs. Now let me try again. Let me remove the collection address. Let's go. And it's 92. So what it means is that we're actually filtering by collection. And if I go here, I can see that this contract address ends in E258. And if I go to the Etherscan other side contract page, we can see that their contract address ends with E258. So I'm pretty sure this is the same contract, and these 3 NFTs are belonging to the other side collection. But to make sure and double check, let me open the metadata, let me click on the image, let me go on another page, remove the quotes as we did before, press enter, and as you can see here, we have our other side NFT. Amazing. So now we know that if we write only wallet address, we're going to fetch for all the NFTs owned by that address. If we also add the collection, we're going to add, sorry, this is not the collection, we're going to fetch only the NFTs owned by that address but belonging also to that collection. Amazing. Oh, let me uncomment that. This is very, very important actually. Now that we have checked that our function is working and our NFTs are fetched, now what we want to do is set the NFTs into this variable. Now, do you recall though that when we open our JSON file, it doesn't only have the owned NFTs inside, but also has other data that we don't really need? Well, we need to filter it out. We don't need that data. We don't want to carry this data over our software, our website. To do so, very, very simple. Inside the set NFTs, instead of passing the wall NFT object, we can pass the NFTs.owned NFTs. And I'm just copying the name of the object, or the property of the object that we saw before. Amazing. Now what this will do, it will set the NFTs into this variable. If we want to check, we can just click on Let's Go with the address we saw before. We're seeing 92 NFTs here. I can go under components using my React tool, developer tools. And here you can see that our third state now holds an array with all these NFTs. So if I open this up, I can see the token URI, media, and all the properties we saw before. We've seen before. Amazing. Now, next step is to create a function that fetch NFTs for collection. So how do we do that? Let's do it. So const, as we did with fetch URL, with fetch NFTs up here. So I'm gonna call it fetch NFTs for collection. And it's gonna be another async function, and it's gonna be an arrow function as we had before. In this case, again, it's gonna check if collection is there. So collection.length. And I'm gonna open this up. Why am I checking this? Because if the collection is not there, there's no point for us to fetch for collection, because we're not providing an address for a collection. Now, the logic other than that is very, very similar as the logic we had before. Now let me copy some code here. So the first thing I'm gonna copy is my API key and the base URL, and I'm gonna modify the base URL. So inside the if collection.length, I'm going to modify the base URL with a new endpoint. Where do I get the new endpoint to fetch NFTs for collection? Again, I can go to the Alchemy documentation and I can check for the get NFTs for collection page. Scroll a little bit, and in the example here, I will have the endpoint with me. Now, let's take a look. Let's first grab this endpoint and paste it here, and let's take a look at the different parameters we can pass into our function. So it will get a bunch of parameters. There is contract address, so we'll need the address of the collection you're looking for. And then there is this thing called with metadata. What do we mean by that? Well, if set to true, it returns the NFT metadata. Otherwise, we return token IDs and defaults to false. So if you set the with metadata parameter to true, it will also retrieve the information such as image, attributes, and so on and so forth, everything that is included in the metadata. If you don't, it will only return the token IDs, and you will need to fetch the metadata using this other endpoint that wants a contract address and token ID to fetch the metadata of that NFT. Now, as you can think, probably in this case, we want the metadata straight away because we want to process it, we want to display it. We don't want to run multiple calls to fetch all the metadata of our NFTs. We want just to run one call and get all the things we need with the metadata. So in this case, we're going to use metadata true. And that's pretty much it. So if we check the URL here, we can see there is a contract address that we're going to use. We're not going to use the star token because we're not going to use pagination. This is part of the challenge again. And we're going to use the with metadata. So let's go back to our code and go to the line we wrote before where we were building our fetch URL. Paste it here. We can write all under the same block, not just like we did before, because we're not fetching for multiple things. We're not looking for multiple things. And here, instead of owner, is going to be contract address. Let's double check that is correct. Contract address, and then and with metadata. I'm going to copy paste it just for the sake of the tutorial and avoid doing typos. So and with metadata, and it's going to be true. All right, so what it's going to do is going to fetch all of our NFTs and retrieve also the metadata. Now, again, we need to do the same thing. So we're going to run NFTs. We haven't declared our NFTs variable. We can do it here now because we're not checking for multiple things. So everything is on the same flow. Let's call it a flow. The next step is change the wallet variable here with the collection, because we're not using the wallet address, but we're using the collection address. And then here add a if statement, and if the NFTs have been found, so if we've found NFTs, we want to console log them as we did before. So console log and then NFTs in collection. and then use the colon, and then comma, and the NFTs. Amazing. The next step though is to tell the button when we click it to fetch for a collection or to fetch for the NFTs owned by an address. How do we do it? Do you remember we created this checkbox before? First of all, let me add a label here because I feel it's very, very important to make it more clear. So fetch for collection. And this checkbox will determine if we're checking for a collection or not. But how? Well, we need a new variable. As we had before, we need a variable to store the value of this checkbox. That turns out to be false or true or false. So I can go up here, write const, and then is fetch for collection, and set fetch for collection. And this will be a use state. And instead of being a string, it's gonna be a bool. So in this case, it's gonna be false because by default, we don't want to fetch by collection, we want to fetch by address, wallet address. So here, inside the input, we can write onChange, as we saw before with our text input, open the new braces and use an arrow function with the event argument here, arrow function, open the curly braces, and instead of using eTarget.value, we're gonna use eTarget.checked. So I'm gonna write set, what was the name here? I'm gonna copy this, paste it here. And then here it's gonna be e.target.checked. So it's gonna return true or false based if it's checked or not. Now, inside our button now, we can check if our fetch for collection variable is true or false. So if it's true, we want to fetch for collection. If it's false, we want to fetch for owner, address, and wallet address. So how do we do it? I'm gonna delete these for now, if, and then what was the name? Fetch NFTs for collection. No, it wasn't the name, that's why I usually copy paste. Fetch for collection is true. Then we want to fetch NFTs for collection. That is the name of our function here. Otherwise, we're gonna just fetch NFTs. Amazing, that's it. Now we can go back to our application, refresh, if there are no errors. Input is void element, neither have children. Oh, we're probably writing, oh my bad. So I tried to write fetch for collection inside the input where it actually should be inside the label. So I can go back to our application. Now everything is working as expected. So let's test it out again. First of all, I'm gonna move to OpenSea profile, in this case, Hans-Peter Mullings. Thank you for providing us your NFTs. And I'm gonna paste his wallet address here. I'm gonna write let's go. As you can see now we have fetch for collection. We have 92 NFTs. Now I want to go to the other side, contract address, and paste it here. I'm gonna fetch again, so let's go. No worries, we're gonna style this later on. Now we can see we only have 3 arrays, so it means it's working. I'm gonna delete the wallet address, I'm gonna tick the fetch for collection, and I'm gonna see the state if it updated. Oops, not profiler, but component, and as you can see now we have true. If we untick this, it's gonna become false. So true, false, true, false, true, false. It's taking a couple of seconds because there's some delay. So in this case, true. And what I want to do is click here, and it's telling me request options is not defined. Why that? Let's go back to our code. As we can see here, we have specified our request options variable. So I'm gonna copy this here. I'm gonna go back to our function. Inside the if statement, I'm gonna paste the request options because we're using the request options in the fetch function. Going back to our application, click on let's go again, check the console. And as you can see here now, we have an array with 100 NFTs belonging to the E258 collection. What it means is that we're actually fetching all the NFTs belonging to the other side collection with just a few lines of code. Amazing. Now, next step is to create the NFT cards to display the information about our NFTs, such as the metadata, the image, the attributes, the title, the ID, and also actually to style this application a little bit because at this moment it's looking awful. So the first thing we want to do is go back to our code, and we were forgetting one thing actually. After we have fetched our NFTs, we want to set the NFT variable. So I'm gonna write set NFTs inside our fetch NFTs for collection function, and I'm gonna add our NFTs. Now, are we sure we just want to pass NFTs? Well, let's go back to our Explorer, and in the console, we can see just logged out NFTs in collection object. And as you can see here, we actually have two objects, not just one, and the other one is next token. And we only want the array of NFTs. So how do we do that? Well, as we did before with own NFTs, so NFTs.own NFTs, here we want to pass we want to do the same thing, but in this case with NFTs.NFTs, because this is the name of the property. Amazing. So this will set our NFTs variable. Let's test it out. So I have my collection, smart contract address with the fetch for collection checkbox ticked. We can click on let's go. I can go to the components explorer for the React development tools, and here you can see the state is filled with a bunch of NFTs, and all of these NFTs are belonging to the, let me actually expand these, to the E258 contract, that is the other side contract. If I open another random NFT, it should be from the same collection, that is the 258. Amazing. So now we know that we're actually setting our NFTs to be the collection NFTs. And the same happens if you're actually fetching the NFTs based on the owner address. Amazing. Now we can go back to our NFT card actually. So let's go back again to our code and create a new folder and call it components. You can click on this button here, create a new folder, call it components, and create a new file inside. Oops, wrong, misclicked. So in the folder, click on this new file button and call it NFT card.jsx. And here we want to export a new React component that is going to be export const NFT uppercase NFT card, not case, equal, and then our function as we are used to see in this tutorial, and then open the curly braces. The first thing we want to do is write our return statement, open the braces, and inside the return statement, we're going to return a div. Now, if you're not familiar with React components especially, you might not know that they can accept a thing called a prop, and a prop is nothing more than a variable we can pass through the parent component. So let's see, for example, this type. This can be considered a prop, and we're telling the component that we want a checkbox type input. In this case, we want a text type input, and the component will take care of choosing the right input, of assigning the right input to the prop we passed. And the same thing we want to do in the NFT card. So as a prop here, we want an NFT because we want to get the data of that NFT and display those in the component. So how do we do that? Well, we have two ways. Or we write props, or we give a random name of the variables, so like variables here, and we access all of our variables like variable dot and then the thing we're passing as props. Or we can use a thing called object deconstruction. So we can open the curly braces, and inside the curly braces we can write NFT. So what do we mean by that? Is that later on we'll be able to pass an NFT as a prop and access this directly without going through props dot something. Again, if you want to know more about props and React component, you can go on Google for React component props, and here you'll see the react.js.org documentation that will walk you through what are components and what are props inside components. Now, again, go back to our code, and what we want to do first of all is to test our NFT cards. How do we do that? Well, we are returning a div, and I want to return the NFT.title inside that div. How do we do that? Well, we can simply, inside our div tag, open a new paragraph tag, and inside the paragraph tag, open our curly braces, and from our curly braces, call the NFT.title. How do we know that the title is contained into the NFT.title property? Well, if we go back to the NFTs we fetched before, we can see that inside every NFT, there is a title property that we can access with NFT.something. Why NFT. Because we're calling our element, our array index 0 or 1 or 2 NFT, and we're passing them as props to these NFT card component. Amazing. So using NFT.title will allow us to actually show the title of the NFTs. But first, we need to import our card into the home page, because otherwise we won't be able to render it, right? How do we do that? If we go back to our index.jsx page and we open a new div tag, oh, there is an extra div tag here actually, but I can open a new one here. Inside this div tag, I want to render a bunch of NFTs. Well, NFTs card actually. Inside the div, we can open a new curly braces. And inside the curly braces, we can check if the NFTs variable has something inside. Well, we can write NFTs.length, and then it was a thing called the ternary operator, actually a variation of the ternary operator that is double ampersand. So if NFTs.length is true, so is more than 0, what we do is we want to render an NFT card for every NFT we fetched. How that? Well, we can write NFTs, and because we know NFTs are an array, and arrays in JavaScript have this function called map. So we can write map, and what the map function will do, it will do something, will perform an operation for every element of that array. So every element of that array will be called NFT. So for every NFT into the NFTs array, run this operation. That operation will be returning, open the braces, an NFT card with an NFT as a prop. Which NFT? Well, the NFT we're getting here inside the map. So here we will get an error because we aren't importing our NFT card yet. So let's go back to the top of the file and write import NFT card from, and then here will be components / NFT card. Amazing. So let's go back to our application. Let's check. Actually, it's fetching in 0 because there is nothing inside. So let's copy this random collection contract address. Let's go back to our localhost 301, fetch collections, click let's go. And these will print out the title of all the NFTs owned in this collection. So RAG Radio Membership Pass is probably the name. Yeah, RAG Radio Membership Pass. So for every NFT we're fetching, going back here, we can check inside home. We can check our state. For every NFT we're fetching RAG Radio Membership, we're creating, rendering an NFT card. In this case, just the title of the NFT. Amazing. Let's go back and let's continue creating our NFT cards to show more information. So we don't want to show only the title, of course. We also want to show the image. So inside the div, I'm going to open a new div tag. And inside this div tag, I'm going to open a image tag, which serves, that is the image URL. Won't be an URL, actually will be an URL, but we won't pass an hard-coded URL. It will be an nft.media and then index0.gateway. How do I know that? Well, let's go back to our application. Let's look at the NFTs we just fetched. And if you look at every NFTs, inside we'll have a media, that is an actual array. And at index 0, it will have 2 properties that are row and gateway. As we saw before, row is usually the row IPFS link, so it's not sure that we will get an image out of it, that we'll be able to access the image under a row IPFS link. What we know is that we will be always, or 99% of the times, able to access an image that is behind a gateway IPFS link. So like in this case is under arweave, and if we click on this we can see the image, and we want these as a search URL for our images. So going back, this will be nft.media 0 index 0.gateway. Amazing. So this is complaining a little bit. Why are you complaining? What's the issue here? We're not closing the image tag. Now that we have closed the image tag, the next step is to display the title, the token ID, the address, and other things such as the small icon that will allow us to copy the contract address, the collection address, to fetch and filter collections and NFTs owned by an address by collection. So I'm going to open a new div here, and inside the div, I'm going to add a bunch of tags. It's going to be a h2 tag that will contain our NFT title. And we're going to have another tag that is going to be a p tag with our token ID. But our token ID, as we saw before, is going to be a bit long. So let's see it first. nft.id.tokenID is where we're going to find our ID. And let's go back to our application. Let's fetch for collection. Click on let's go. This will show a bunch of images now that we're getting from media 0 gateway, but also this very long ID. And we don't really want to show the whole ID, the full ID, because it doesn't make sense to have like this very long list of zeros. So we're gonna trim it down. How do we cut it down? Well, we can use a function that is coming from JavaScript that is substring and is only available for strings. In this case, we know our ID is a string, and we can write nft.id.tokenID .length. So we want to get all the length of our NFTs -4. So we only want the latest 4 characters, the last 4 characters of our string. In this case, it will be 003A or 0058 or 0007. Oh, that's funny, 0007. So length, I don't know how to spell anymore, -4. So now if we go back to our application, as you can see, we have 001D, 003A, and 0058. Amazing. Now, next step is to show our contact address. So we go back, I'm gonna open a new p tag, and inside the p tag, I'm opening my curly braces, and the address is gonna be inside NFT, the contract.address. But again, in this case, the address is going to be very, very long. We don't want all of it. So what we're going to do is going to do the same thing we did before, cutting the string a little bit. So we're gonna get the first 4 characters and the latest 4 characters, just like OpenSea is doing. So if we go back to OpenSea, here, you can see there are like the first 5 characters in this case and the latest 4 characters. Let's do the same. So go back to our application, and I'm gonna copy paste the code into this case, just because I'm sure I won't never get the typo correctly. So I'm going to copy everything inside my curly braces in my code here, delete what's inside here, and paste it here. As you can see, we're doing exactly the same, plus we're using literals. So we're using backtick and opening, as we did before, our dollar symbol with the curly braces, and then the substring from 0 to 4, so from the first character to the 4th character. And the same we're doing here, so we're getting the length of our contact address -4, as we did with token ID, and displaying it all together with 3 dots in between. So going back to our localhost, as you can see, we have 0xd1. Now, if we want to make it longer, we can use the 5th character, and it's gonna be 0xd1d, 3 dots, cf04. Amazing. Now, the next thing we're going to need to add is the description of our NFT, a little button that will send us to the smart contract, the collection page on Etherscan, and a small icon that will allow us to copy the collection address to filter when we're looking for NFTs owned by an address. Now, how do we do it? I'm gonna copy some code because it's actually very, very similar to what we already wrote. And here down the div, we're gonna open a new div tag, and inside that div tag, we're going to open a new p tag, and inside the p tag, opening the curly braces as we did before, we're going to get the description. Sometimes NFTs won't have a description, and React might complain, and adding this small question mark is like saying, if the description is not there, just ignore this line. So if the description is there, we're going to get the first character to the 150th character. It'll be longer than the ID, of course, because we want to read more about NFTs and display it on our page. So if we go back now, we can see this description has appeared. And again, how did I know that? If I click on one of these NFTs, so if we go under Home, State, open one of these NFTs, there is NFT.description, and is our description, the description of the NFT. Now, the other thing we want to do is the button that will redirect us to the page of the NFT collection on Etherscan. But before doing that, we need to understand how these URLs, how Etherscan is handling URLs of collections. To do that, you can go on Etherscan and look, for example, for the other deed collection. And as you can see here, we have https://etherscan.io/token, and then the contact address of the collection. So it's very, very easy to build this URL. And we're doing the same here. So I'm gonna copy some code again. I'm gonna open a div. And inside the div, I'm inserting an a tag, href tag, which target is blank. And I'm going to show you why it's blank in a few seconds. So let me remove this. And inside the href, so the URL this a tag will bring us to, will redirect us to, it will be https://etherscan.io/token/ the contract address of our NFT, with, of course, view on Etherscan written on the inside. So if we go back to our application, localhost 3001, we now have this view on Etherscan button, and we can click on it. But as you can see now, as soon as we clicked on it, okay, great, we're on the right page, so it's working, but he went out from our application. It didn't open a new tab. We want to open a new tab because we don't want the users to leave our application. We don't want the users to leave this like very, very annoying thing that they'll need to go back to fetch the NFTs and then look for the collection address again and redo everything over and over again. So what we're going to do is, let me grab an NFT address, a contract address of a collection, and let me research for the collection. I have fetch for collection selected and click on let's go. We have an issue here that is telling us our contract address, something is not working. Oh yeah, this is a Next.js error. So let me refresh. Here we go. I just had to tick and untick the toggle box, and now we have our NFTs back with our view on Etherscan button. What we want to do though is add back the blank redirection. Here the target equals blank will mean that when we click on the button, it won't go away from the page, but it will open a new tab and it will display the URL in that new tab. So let's try again. I can click on view in Etherscan. Now it's creating a new tab and our application is still here, and we can look at all information we need, and we can go back to our application without having to research for our NFT collection, for the NFT collection we were looking at. Amazing. So that's pretty much it. Now, the next step is to style our application, because at the moment it's looking very, very bad, and to add a small icon that will allow us to copy the smart contract collection address of our NFTs that we'll use later on to filter again, as we said, by collection. As you can remember, as you surely remember, we installed Tailwind.css, and Tailwind.css will handle all of our styles, so we won't have to write a single line of CSS. It's very, very simple. This is not a Tailwind CSS tutorial, so I'm gonna copy paste a bunch of code and I'll try to explain to you what's going on and why I'm using that code. If you want to dig deeper into how to use Tailwind, their documentation is fabulous, so just write Tailwind CSS documentation on Google and you'll have all the answers you need. But in this case, again, let me go through it a little bit. So first of all, we have our div that is containing everything. And as you can see, we have this class name, and Tailwind CSS works exactly this way. So you'll have a class name that represents your classes, the classes that your element, that your HTML element has associated with it. And inside of it, you will write a bunch of lines like flex, minimum height, flex column, item center, and so on and so forth to style your elements. So let's start from this div here. And I'm going to delete this class name because we're going to add new code. And what I want here is I want our div to be flex. So if you don't know what flex is, again, go on Google, search for it. Super important to style your application and how to use flex. And I want this to be flex column because I want all the elements of my application to be in a column and not in a single row. And all of them has to be at the center, so at the center of the screen, and justified vertically with some gap between. And then I'm gonna add some code to my inside div, so the second div here. And these will have a flex again with full width, justified at the center because we want our NFTs to be displayed at the center, and center also vertically with some gap between all the rows. So gap Y will be 2 pixels. Now for the input, so for our first input, we want them at the moment, as you can see here. Oh, you can see the effect of our flex column here because we have now our inputs on 2 different rows. What we want though is our inputs to be larger, more thicker, and actually have different colors when we focus on those. So let me click on my old code. Let me copy some lines here and let me go to my input. I'm gonna paste it here. And now my input will look exactly like this. So what did we do? We first of all changed the width. We changed the width to 2/5. If we change it to 3/5, it's gonna be even longer. But I think that 2/5 is big enough, it's long enough, it's spaced enough. And then we're adding a background that will be background slate 100. You can use 200 to make it more darker. I will use 100 because I like this like soft lighty color. And then we have other things such as rounded because we want the corners to be rounded, and the padding is 2 pixels, and the text is gray because we want the text to be gray and not full black. We can like remove these and the text will go back to black, as you can see here. Actually it didn't, because there is no text at this point. So at this point is black. If we go back and reestablish the text, gray 800, now it's not black anymore, it's actually gray 800. That is very similar to black. And then we want the focus outline blue line, so when we click on it, it will be like this light blue instead of this like very darkish blue / purple. Plus when it's disabled, we want the text to be grade 50. And why disabled though? This is a great question. And the thing is that if we want to fetch for collection, that we don't want to use a wallet address, right? So we want our wallet address input to be disabled so the users can't be like, can mistakenly add a wallet address while fetching a collection, and this could become super confusing. So how do we deactivate this input? Well, you can go back to your code, and every each input and button actually has this property that is the property disabled, and you can open the curly braces here and associate this property. Oh my god, I don't know how to spell anymore. Equal, and then open the curly braces and associate this property to this is fetch for collection true. So if it's fetch for collection true, then it will be disabled. Otherwise, it will be false and it won't be disabled. So if I go back here, now as you can see, I cannot click on this input anymore. So if we want to try like the other way around, we can put a exclamation mark before that is not fetch for collection. And now as you can see, we can actually click on it and modify it back. If we deactivate the fetch for collection, now it's deactivated. Again, if I go back, now fetch for collection is deactivated. We can write. If we want to fetch for collection, this becomes deactivated. Amazing. Let's go on and let's go back. Let's go on actually inside our other input. So class name, I'm gonna copy the same class name because our inputs will be identical. And for the label, we want to change the color of our text. So label class name will be text grade 600. And for the class name of our input, the checkbox, we want to add some margin because there is no margin between the label and the checkbox. So I'm going here, class name margin right 2. And last but not least, we want to add a class name to our button so we can style it better and it can look a bit better because at the moment it's just a let's go written on the screen. So I'm going back to our button before the on click and paste this disable, BG slave, blah, 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 text white, and so on and so forth. So now we have this amazing button that has been styled, and now the last thing we need to do is to style our NFT cards. But before, I want to take a look at the actual NFT cards and remember ourselves how ugly those are. So I'm gonna click on the toggle box again. So we want to fetch for collection, and as you can see, they're all folded, taking the wall page, and the title is not showing properly. I mean, it's showing, but not with enough importance, and the view on scan button doesn't look like a button. So that's exactly what we're going to do now. As I did before, I'm gonna copy paste some code and I'm gonna walk you through what that code does. So let me copy it. And now if I go back here and paste it here, is exactly the same logics with the same HTML tags with just a couple of differences that are the styles. So the first thing we wanted to do, as you can see now, our card is looking way better. The first thing we're doing is assigning every niche card a width of 1/4 because we want to show multiple cards on the same line, and in this case we want to show 3 cards. So it's 1/4 plus the gap plus a bit of margin. This will allow us to show 3 cards per row, and then we want it to be flex and flex column because we want all the elements of this card to be one under each other and not one near each other on the same row. Plus, we wanted to round our image a little bit, so the top corner of our image is rounded, and we did this by using rounded top medium. We can change it to large to make it more rounded. As you can see now, it's a little bit more rounded. And the thing that you should pay attention to is this object cover. What does object cover do? If you go to Tailwind CSS and then look for object cover, there is an extensive explanation of it, but simply put, our NFTs in this case are perfect squares, but chances are that not all NFTs are perfect squares. You will have triangles, you have rectangles, you have different shapes, and what you want to do is to maintain the aspect ratio of a square image without stretching the actual NFT. To do that, you can use object cover, that is telling CSS, the browser actually, just make sure that image covers its container without stretching it, instead of changing the size or trying to match the size of the image with the container. It just doesn't make sense. Just make sure that the object cover is there, so it will cover the div behind, and you can change the size of the div behind to change the size of the image without stretching it. Again, you can look at the Tailwind CSS documentation to learn more about it. In this case, it works perfectly. Then we are adding a new div, that is the div that we're using to store, to show our ID and contact address. And again, we're using an actually title. And again, we're making it flex and flex column because we want one element to be under the other with some gap between each other, with a background that will be slate 100. We can change it to, I don't know, black background black. And in this case, we're changing the whole background of the card to black because this is the div containing everything. And we're also rounding a little bit the bottom because we want the bottom to be rounded. We can remove the rounding, removing this line here. So instead of being rounded, be medium, it will be nothing, and now it's not rounded anymore. And then I can go back and the height will be 110. And then we have a div, and inside the div where we have our title again, and we have the description and the ID, sorry, the contact address and the ID. And in this case, we want to change the title to be a bit bigger and a bit darker. So in this case is XL, text XL with gray 800. That is a bit lighter than black, but much more darker than this gray 600. And the same we're doing with the ID and contact address. So we're changing the color of those to gray 600. Now, for what concerning the description, then what we wanted here is to have the button always at the bottom of our card. And to do that, we can use flex grow, that is telling this div to take all the available space, plus the margin top, because we want some margin between the ID, the smart contract address, and the actual description of the NFT. Last but not least, we're justifying our button to the center because we want it to display to the center. If we remove justify center, this will display to the left. And if we re-add it back, this will display back to the center. We can actually also justify right if we want to display it on the right. Oh, it's not justify right. Actually, I think it's justify end. So we do want to display it to the end with some margin bottom because we don't want it to be completely attached to the bottom of our, oh my god, what am I clicking, to the bottom of our card. Amazing. And then last but not least, we are giving a background blue 500 to our button and adding a bunch of styling to this as well, such as the cursor to be a pointer, so that it actually looks like a button, because when we over it, the small hand cursor will show up. If we remove cursor pointer, this won't show up anymore and it won't look like a button anymore. Oh, it's showing? Oh yeah, because there is an href, but if we remove also the href, actually, this won't show anymore. Here we go. So now it's like a reading pointer again. So we want to make sure that, willing or not, knowing or not, if this href URL is there, we want the small and icon to appear. So we're using the cursor, the pointer, sorry, dash pointer property. Now, one last thing is to style our index page in a way that it displays all the NFT cards on the same row and not like in a column like is happening right now. So what we can do here, we can go back to our index.jsx page, and inside the div that is actually taking care of containing all of our NFT cards, we can add a new class name and copy paste the following code. Again, there is the repo linked in the description. And what is this code doing here? We're essentially like wrapping, creating a flex. So we're making this flex and we're wrapping all around these images. So we want to make sure that our div is not larger than these images here, because if we remove the flex wrap, as you can see, now they will go on forever. So we will be able to display all of the NFTs on the same line, and we don't want that. We want all the NFTs, 3 NFTs per line. And to do that, we want to wrap our div around the sizes of our NFT cards, then some gap between one line and each other, and the width of our 3 NFT row gallery to be 5/6 actually of the total width, and justify center because we want them to be at the center. And again, if I remove justified center, you'll see all these aligning to the left. Amazing. So that was it. Let's test it out and see if everything works as expected. So let me go to OpenSea again. Let me grab a random project, Moonbirds in this case. Let me grab this random Moonbird, Pizza is the name of this guy. So let me grab his wallet address. I can remove Antique the fetch for collection and click on Let's Go. Fetching is NFTs. And now we can see all of these NFTs. Sometimes it might happen that there is no image associated with it because the metadata is having issues. But you can see here we have our birds, our moon birds. So we can go back to OpenSea, grab the contract address of the moon birds and filter by collection. So I can click on here, copy it, go back to our application, filter by collection, and we only get the moonbirds. But what if we want only to get all the moonbirds, so all the whole moonbirds collection? We can click on fetch collection, add the link here, the address here, and now we have the whole moonbird collection showing up. Amazing. Now, I told you we needed to add this small icon to copy the contract address. Well, I lied. This is exactly part of the challenge. I want you to do two things for this week challenge. The first thing is add a small icon here, as we did before in our other application, that will allow us to copy the smart contract address just by clicking on the icon. So we don't need every time to go on OpenSea, search for the smart contract address, or to display the whole smart contract address in our cards. This is the first challenge, so icon to copy the smart contract address of the collection. And the second one, if you go to our NFT API docs, as you can see here, for example, for get NFTs for collection, we have the start token parameters. That is an offset used for pagination. What do we mean by that? If you look at our application now and look at localhost, you only be able to see the first 100 of NFTs belonging to that collection, not all of them. There are 10,000 moonbirds, only 100 are showing on this page. Why that? Because we can paginate, and the NFT API will send you back only the first 100 NFTs unless you use this thing that is the start token that is telling the NFT API from which token do you want to start. So how would that work? Well, in this case, we're starting from token 0 to token 100. We want to start probably from token 101 to token 201, and so on and so forth, as long as we go until you reach the end of the collection. So the job you'll need to do is understand how many NFTs are in that collection and add this pagination. So what I'm expecting is that there'll be a number down here at the end of the page where you can change the page and load the following 100 NFTs. Now, in this lesson, we learn how to create the blockchain using the Alchemy NFT API. We learn how to fetch NFTs based on wallet address. We learn how to fetch NFTs based on collection or based on wallet address and filter those by collection. We also built a fully fledged front end using Next and Tailwind CSS to display the metadata such as images, title, ID, and smart contract address of our NFTs. Plus, we created a fancy button to bring us to the Etherscan collection page to fetch and see all the information about that collection. Now, once again, your challenge for this week is to create the pagination system and add a small icon here to copy the collection address without going through OpenSea and Etherscan over again. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment and leave a like, and join the Alchemy Road to Web3 weekly challenges to meet hundreds, thousands of developers ready to help you out, win NFTs every week after you completed the challenges, participate into weekly hackathons to win even more rewards, and definitely join an amazing community with daily Web3 alpha. There is the link to our Discord server and Telegram channel right in the description. Thank you so much for sticking with me for this hour. Have a great one and see you soon. Bye.